Okay, picture this. It's late Friday night, June 20th, 2025. Outside an ICE detention center down in Louisiana, a man walks out, Mahmoud Khalil, Columbia University activist. His release isn't just routine. It's mandated by a federal judge,
Right.
ending months of a really intense legal fight and a very personal family separation. So today, we're diving deep into Mahmoud Khalil's release. We're pulling our information straight from a detailed CBS News report. It gives us a look at the judge's decision, the human side of his detention, and, of course, how the government reacted.
Right, and our goal here is really to unpack all of this for you. We want to get into the complex legal stuff, understand the personal story behind it all, and figure out what the bigger picture implications might be. We'll try to cut through some of the noise.
Okay, let's set that scene again. Friday night, June 20th, Mahmoud Khalil walks out of that ICE facility in Louisiana. And it's worth remembering, he's not just an activist, he's a green card holder, someone quite involved at Columbia. And the first thing he says, it really stands out. He apparently looked right at the reporters and said, Trump and his administration, they chose the wrong person for this.
Yeah, quite a statement. And it really highlights the core tension, doesn't it? His release wasn't like an ICE decision. It was ordered by a federal judge. That tells you right away this was a significant legal showdown.
So he's out now, but let's back up. Why was he detained in the first place? When did this all start, and what was the official reason?
Well, he was picked up by immigration agents way back in March. The initial reason given by the Trump administration was based on foreign policy concerns, and this stemmed from a specific determination made by Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Right, the foreign policy angle. But beyond the legal side, what about the personal cost for him, his family? That must have been incredibly tough.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where the story gets, really human. His wife, Noor Abdallah, was actually 8 months pregnant when they detained him.
8 months pregnant.
Yeah. And their first child, a boy named Dean, was born in April, while Mood was still locked up. You can only imagine the stress, the heartache.
And it didn't stop there, right? I read that immigration officials actually denied his request to be released temporarily just to attend the birth.
That's correct. They denied that request. Although, it's worth noting a judge did later grant him a brief visit with his son just last month.
Still missing the birth. And you can just feel the relief later. He said something about finally being able to go home.
Yes. His quote was, "Now I can actually hug him and Noor, my wife, without looking at the clock." Really captures that feeling of, freedom and relief.
And his wife, Noor Abdallah, she's spoken out too.
She has, quite powerfully. Back in March, she said in an interview, "My husband was taken away from me in the middle of the night. It was one of the most terrifying times of my life." She added, "I don't think I've ever experienced anything scarier than that."
That's harrowing.
And then after his release, in a statement through the ACLU, she said, "We can finally breathe a sigh of relief and know that Mahmoud is on his way home to me and Dean, who never should have been separated from his father."
Such a difficult time for them. Okay, so the turning point was clearly this judge's ruling. Let's get into that. U.S. District Judge Michael Farbiar's in New Jersey. How did he arrive at the decision to order Khalil's release? Well, Judge Farbiar's was pretty clear in his assessment. He found Khalil was, quote, not a threat to the community, not a flight risk. And he even called the whole detention highly unusual.
Right. And crucially, it wasn't just that he ordered the release. He specifically denied the government's request to put that order on hold, to stay the decision while they appealed.
Okay. So he wanted him released immediately, no delays.
Exactly. Immediate release.
So the judge says he's not a flight risk, not a threat. But what about those original foreign policy concerns raised by Secretary Rubio? How did Judge Farbiar's address that?
That's a key piece. Judge Farbiar's had actually ruled just the week before that Khalil couldn't be held just based on Secretary Rubio's determination. That ruling itself was significant, a federal judge pushing back on that kind of executive branch declaration in an immigration detention context.
Okay, so that first justification was already weakened by the judge. Did DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, then come up with another reason to keep him detained?
They did, yeah. After that ruling, DHS shifted tactics. They argued he should remain detained because of alleged omissions on his green card application.
A different reason altogether.
Right. But Judge Farbiar's looked at that too and basically found this new reason wasn't strong enough to justify keeping him locked up either.
And he was pretty blunt about it, wasn't he? I think there was a direct quote.
Yes, he stated, "It's overwhelmingly unlikely that a lawful permanent resident would be held on the remaining charge here." Essentially saying, this isn't the kind of thing people usually get detained for indefinitely.
Okay, so the judge wasn't buying the new reason either. And did he suggest why the government might be pursuing this?
Well, this is perhaps the most pointed observation from Judge Farbiar's. He suggested, quote, "There is an effort to use the immigration charge here to punish the petitioner, specifically for his anti-Israel speech."
Punish him for his speech.
That was the implication, and we should remember the context here. Khalil was a graduate student at Columbia. He was involved in leading student protests against Israel's war in Gaza back in 2024. He's since graduated, but that's the backdrop. The judge seemed to be pointing towards potential political motivation behind the detention.
That's a pretty strong statement from a federal judge. Now, what about claims sometimes made in these situations, things like violence or property destruction? Did the government present any evidence of that?
According to Judge Farbiar's, no. He explicitly stated that the government attorneys provided zero evidence to back up any claims of violence or property destruction by Khalil.
Zero evidence.
His words were, what all that evidence adds up to is a lack of violence, a lack of property destruction, a lack of anything that would be characterized as inciting violence. So a pretty clear finding on that front.
But wasn't there another ruling somewhere else that contradicted this? I seem to recall something about Louisiana.
Yes, that's an important complexity. During the hearing before Judge Farbiar, Khalil's lawyers pointed out that an immigration judge down in Louisiana had actually denied him a bond hearing, denied asylum, and even found him removable, meaning deportable, based on that initial declaration from Secretary Rubio.
So, two judges, very different conclusions based on essentially the same initial premise.
Exactly. A direct conflict between the Louisiana immigration judge's findings and Judge Farbiar's order in New Jersey. It really highlights the legal complexities and differing interpretations here.
Okay, so Judge Farbiar orders the release, despite the Louisiana ruling. How did the administration react? I imagine they weren't pleased.
Not at all. Even before Khalil actually walked out, the White House, via spokeswoman Abigail Jackson, stated they were definitely appealing Farbiar's decision.
On what grounds?
Jackson argued there was, quote, "no basis for a local federal judge in New Jersey who lacks jurisdiction to order Khalil's release from a detention facility in Louisiana. A direct challenge to the judge's authority."
So a jurisdictional fight as well. And they expected to win on appeal.
That's what they said. They added they expect to be vindicated on appeal and look forward to removing Khalil from the United States. So very clearly signaling their intent to continue pursuing his deportation.
And DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, did they weigh in?
Oh, yes. DHS spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin had some very strong words. She called the judge's order yet another example of how out-of-control members of the judicial branch are undermining national security.
Out-of-control members of the judicial branch. That's quite the accusation.
It is. Very strong language, framing it as judicial overreach impacting national security.
Did McLaughlin reiterate the specific reasons DHS believes Khalil should be detained and removed?
She did. She stated the Trump administration was acting within its authority because, in their view, Khalil advocates for violence, glorifies and supports terrorists, harasses Jews, and damages property. She also pointed back to that Louisiana immigration judge's ruling, claiming it had already vindicated their position, so directly countering Judge Farbiar's findings.
Okay, so a clear clash between the judiciary and the executive branch here. Now, putting the legal fight aside for a moment, what are the actual conditions of Khalil's release set by Judge Farbiar? He's out, but presumably with restrictions.
Yes, there are specific conditions. His travel is quite restricted. He's allowed to be in New Jersey, New York, Michigan, and Washington, D.C. He can also go to Louisiana, but only for immigration court appearances or to meet with his lawyers.
And what about his documents? Passport? Green card?
He had to surrender his passport. But importantly, his green card is being returned to him, which he'll need, for instance, for that travel to New York. But absolutely no international travel is permitted.
Any other conditions, like electronic monitoring?
Interestingly, no. The judge did not order electronic monitoring, which you sometimes see in these cases. The main requirement is just that he has to provide his current address to DHS within 48 hours of being released.
Okay, so some clear boundaries, but perhaps less restrictive than they could have been.
Right. It seems consistent with the judge's finding that he wasn't a flight risk.
Yeah.
So, when you pull back, this deep dive really shows that tension, doesn't it? You've got the very real, immediate human impact of these legal fights on individuals and families. Then you have the judiciary stepping in, exercising oversight, questioning executive actions. And pushing back against that, you have these really strong assertions of executive power, especially around immigration and claims of national security. This case puts that whole dynamic under a microscope.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe the final thought for you, listening, is this. What does this specific case with these clashing court opinions, the strong government pushback, what does it really tell us about how that balance of power works or maybe doesn't work in immigration policy today? And, how challenging is it to define national security when constitutionally protected speech, even controversial speech, is right in the middle of it all? Something to think about.